Hi, I'm Rachel, and this is my Autumn 2021 quarterly writing update. The second time I'm attempting this video. My first file got corrupted, so hopefully we can stay on track here, and I'd love to get this up today before the year ends. Anyway, I make these videos every 3 months to track the quarter. I make writing goals for myself, particularly for my fiction writing, although I also talk a bit about other writing I do here. You'll see different subject headings come down as I chronicle these last 3 months. So every autumn quarter is a big quarter because it is the Nanowrimo quarter. Nanowrimo stands for National Novel Writing Month, which takes place throughout the month of November, and traditionally speaking, participants join to write 50,000 words of a rough draft of a novel. And I've been participating for 18 years. This was my 18th year. It's a huge, well, not only endeavor, but also popular event because it's not only national, it's international. Hundreds of thousands of people participate, and a lot of them, like me, are rebels. For me, I wrote 50,000 words, so, no matter what, this was my biggest writing quarter of the year. But most of that was nonfiction projects like blogging and reviewing and that sort of thing. I did also work a little on my fantasy project. I will talk more about Nano later on, but I did get through it. And then in December, I did something else fun for the quarter. I joined a virtual writing conference, which was put out by the Jewish Book Council, which is a website I really enjoy, an organization I really enjoy, mostly as a reader, because they keep such tabs on Jewish literature, contemporary Jewish literature. I add a lot of stuff to my TBR because they review it and they promote it, and they work a lot with authors. And so in December, they did a whole, online seminar, which I wrote about in a blog post I'll link below. But generally speaking, there were lots of different panels with agents, with editors, with JBC staff, and with authors talking about their work. And it all was geared toward Jewish publishing to some degree, also just generally what it means to publish and write and that sort of stuff. I ostensibly wanted to join because my fantasy project does have a lot of Jewish influence, and there was a little bit of a fantasy section in the webinar and in the seminar. And even though I'm not ready at all to, query or something like that, I just, thought I should get my feet wet, and I was glad I did. Speaking of blog posts, this is the section of the video where I turn away from my fiction writing and talk about my blogging, because that's a lot of what I do every quarter and every year. I have 3 blogs, and I tend to write at least 1 blog post on each per month. So in this section, I'm picking out my 3 favorite posts of the quarter. So I'll start with Chava's Footsteps, which is a blog where I do a lot of fun pop culture blogging and that sort of thing. And this, in a way, is my NaNoWriMo triumph, was my Nano blog mode that I did on Chava's Footsteps, where I did several blog posts about pop culture. I was very fortunate, I guess, that there were movies like Dune and TV shows like Foundation that were on that I could obsess over in my geeky fun way, and I wrote a lot of good content. But I figured the post I would highlight here is one where I bring a lot of things together, including The Expanse, my beloved Expanse science fiction TV show, which is currently in the middle of its final season. I'm not okay. But anyway, the blog post I'm highlighting is called Why Marco Inaros is More On Point Than Harry Seldon or Paul Atreides, plus a Frank Herbert addendum. So, I'm deep in geek territory with that one, but basically these are 3 characters from Foundation and Dune and Expanse, and I'm comparing them to each other and their arcs and, purposes and what have you. And then at the end, I decided I found an article on Frank Herbert, who is the writer of Dune, which was a classic science fiction book series before it was turned into a few adaptations, most recently the movie earlier this year. And I found a fascinating article about his political influences, so I got to talk a little bit about that, and that was really fun. Then I'll go to my Jewish DC blog, where I chronicle Jewish events happening in the DC area where I live. And the post I'm talking about here, actually, it's more personal. I get more personal in it than I usually do in these posts. And I titled it Jews and Christmas Trees Get the Virtual Talmudic Treatment Over at 6th and I, which is a famous synagogue in these parts, and we had a virtual event with one of the main rabbis there who was giving a bunch of arguments from religious sources, both from biblical on to more contemporary sources, for or against the idea of Jews having a Christmas tree in their homes, which is becoming more prevalent because there's so many Jews with interfaith families. Like, you know, for me, I have parents, my mom is Jewish or my father isn't, or there's also, you know, people who marry interfaith or who are converts or Jews by choice. So, you know, obviously it's a thing, or, you know, it could even be that, you know, some people just like having Christmas trees. It is such a, you know, overwhelming tradition in America, which brings me to something interesting we were talking about in this talk about Christian privilege and how, you know, it isn't actually universal and secular, even though a lot of people think it is, because that belies an attitude that everyone is default Christian, which of course isn't true. So that was interesting to talk about it from that lens. But in general, I really enjoyed this discussion because well, first it was challenging also on the idea of culture and how it's more porous than the most stringent people would like to believe, but also then it gave space for, you know, Jews with these different experiences to sit at the table. And like I go into it a little bit, I guess it's porous cultural stuff. Don't want to get too into that, too into the weeds, but, you know, it was nice and it felt like a change from some other conversations in the Jewish world with regards to what's generally interfaith practice, and you know, if the people who are part of that community can be part of the Jewish community. I decided to feel optimistic about this whole event, and I thought it was really just a fascinating event, a really fun event. And finally, I'll go over to my reading and writing blog, where I will talk about the final post I made this year, which was about the BookTube Prize, because I always have to talk about the BookTube Prize, which is a prize started here on BookTube by Robert at Barter Hordes, where we get together, a lot of volunteer judges get together to judge the best in literary fiction, nonfiction, and next year translated fiction published the year before. So that means that all the big buzzy titles of 2021 will be in contention for the prize next year. So I have this tradition for the past couple of years I really look forward to, where I look at the LitHub Ultimate List, where the LitHub site takes a lot of lists of the best books of the year and then, you know, aggregates and says which books are on the most lists. And I took 6 books off of that list that I'm most interested in. 2 fiction books I've read, 2 fiction books I haven't read, and 2 nonfiction books I haven't read. And I basically talk about my interest in them, and it felt very subjective, really. I mean, all the books were from the lesser half of the lists, like not, you know, 17 lists or something, but like 3 to 6 lists or whatever. But, you know, it was all about me and my connection to these books, because I either knew about the authors, or they were talking about Judaism, or, you know, both, or other topics that I'm interested in. So it's just, you know, a cozy reading post about what speaks to you in literature. So I just love doing that, and I certainly hope I might see these books on the long list. I'll be finding out tomorrow if I can vote for them. But now on to the serious part of this video, the Autumn 2021 Goals Recap, where I have to hold my feet to the fire and see if a certain septa has to visit me at the end. So I'll start with goal number 1, which was to draft a new short story project, and I'm starting out with a goal that I kind of completed. It's not a strict yes or no, because I wrote half of a short story draft, and just the other day I submitted it to a feedback session with my writing group. We're meeting on Monday to do our latest feedback session for our quarterly group. And halfway is where I was at the deadline, so I just decided to go with it. It's kind of weird, really. I don't usually submit something quite so raw and unfinished, you know, not even a full draft finished. But I wanted to be part of this, and I figured this would be an okay way to go. You know, in some previous quarters, I submitted chapters of my fantasy project, and I don't think it really worked well with the structure. First of all, that project is too close to my heart, and second of all, I think it needs a more thorough eye, whereas this feedback session is much more quick like, just 15 minutes of, commentary from the group. And I thought that could be good for a short story, and especially for something like this where I'm not that close to it. I'm playing around with ideas, but I would definitely be more open to more off-the-cuff, reactions, and that I could, work them in, and it hopefully would make things better. So yeah, this is all keeping in my goal, as I said in my last quarterly wrap-up video, that I want to keep being able to write short stories to submit to magazines and get rejected, as you do. Goal number 2 was my October NaNoWrimo goal. Outline Act 2B, plus a new character sheet, which were directly tied into my fantasy project and some, major hurdles I wanted to get to this quarter, which I didn't, and I did not outline Act 2B or write a character sheet for a important character coming up. Absolutely no discussion on failing that goal. Though it is tied into goal number 3, my NaNoWrimo goal, which was to continue working on my fantasy project, which technically I did do. I did work on my fantasy project. I wrote 2 largely rambly outliney chapters of my fantasy project, which is not at all what I was intending. Even as a rebel, I give myself to the idea that I do want to work on other projects, but that doesn't mean I want to work quite this little on the fiction, on the fantasy project, but that's what I ended up doing. And I think it ties a lot into a sense of imposter syndrome that I've been toiling under for a while with this project, and that I just have been so overwhelmed by these feelings of not having my head around the world building or the themes, and then, spiraling over to the characters. So that's why I did not get as much done this quarter as I hoped to, even though I'm only 2 chapters away from the midpoint in Act 2B. I did not finish. And I do have a goal coming up in my next section to try to deal with that. But for now, I think I hear some certain bells ringing.
Shame. Shame. Shame.
Do you think she's going to go be a part of the Game of Thrones prequel, the House of Dragon show that's going to come on next year? Because I think she could really spice some things up over there. But one of the most optimistic things about these videos is no matter what happened in the last section, there's always hope for the future in this section, where I am announcing my winter 2022 goals. Writing goals, yeah. These are the 3 goals I'm holding myself accountable for in the first 3 months of the year. Starting with goal number 1, which is to finish my short story draft for real, which of course ties into my first goal last quarter. If I half completed it then, I can fully complete it this quarter. Goal number 2 is read world building research book and draft out some sketches, by which I am talking about this short little book, which is a bit of history on ancient Israel, which informs a lot of the world building for my fantasy project. And it ties into the idea that I've been feeling so overwhelmed by not feeling confident enough even in the physical settings, and that's what I figured I would tackle with this goal, and with reading this book and sketching things out to say, okay, I understand the physicality of what I'm talking about here. It's as good a place to start as any, really. And finally, goal number 3 is fantasy project. Put Act 2A to bed, which has more or less been a goal of mine for a while, but I am, again, only 2 chapters away from the midpoint, so I really should be able to, hash it out this month. At least some form of rough draft. I should be able to finish it before March. That is what I'm holding myself to. So that about covers it for me now. You can find links to the various things I've been talking about down below, including, I guess, a trailer for the House of Dragons sequel coming out. Speaking of fantasy projects that's hoping to exist on the good grace of Game of Thrones before their final season. It seems like they're also starting at a bit of a downslide and are hoping for a good thing in their upcoming year, just like I am in this new quarter. And with that in mind, I hope that all of my fellow writers also feel accomplished with what they've been able to do this year, and hopeful and secure in the goals they're setting themselves for the new year. Speaking of old year, new year, I will be back on this channel tomorrow on New Year's Day to talk about my favorite books of 2021 and my anticipated reads for 2022. It's one of my favorite videos. I'm very excited to sit down and do that, so stay tuned. In the meantime, thanks so much for watching, everyone. Keep writing, and I'll see you next time.